What if the biggest surprise of the Celtics offseason is not Jayson Tatum's injury, not the exit of Jrue Holiday or Kristaps Porzingis, but rather the possibility that Boston could already be considering moving on from their most intriguing new piece, Anthony Simons? That is exactly the conversation brewing behind the scenes, and it is turning heads across the league.
The new Hudson Studios, it's pretty nice. Bobby told us he had a pork chop, which is nice. Cafeteria is great.
And the temperature in this 100-degree day is perfect in here tonight.
Yes. Yeah, the temperature is good, but what is the temperature right now in Boston?
I think that was part one. I think we're going to see a series of moves from the Celtics here. The goal is to get under this second apron, to give themselves some flexibility to make some trades. Potentially unfreeze their pick in 2033. Jrue Holiday is number one. We're going to keep an eye on Kristaps Porzingis, $18 million below that threshold.
The Celtics have been forced into a strange reality. Tatum's torn Achilles in the semifinals changed everything. The front office shifted its approach overnight, turning from a championship favorite into a team focused on strategic survival. It has not been about panic, but about patience, about setting the foundation for when their superstar returns. In the process, the franchise has restructured its financial flexibility in ways that few predicted, letting go of respected veterans and opening the door to unexpected new narratives. And in the middle of this storm sits Simons, a guard whose scoring talent is undeniable, whose ceiling is still climbing, and yet whose presence on this roster might only be temporary. According to Jake Fisher of Bleacher Report, the Celtics are not shutting the door on trade calls. They are picking up the phone, they are listening, and that single fact leaves fans and analysts wondering.
I mean, you got a championship, they paid him his money, and now he's going off to his next destination. But I love the pickup of Anthony Simons. I'll tell you that much, especially with Jayson Tatum being out. Anthony Simons is how old, Bobby? 27?
26.
He's 26, so he's right in the age group with Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum, and he's a guy that could be a second option to Jaylen Brown because he could put the ball in the basket. We know that. You know, I hear a lot of people criticizing, he was one of the worst defensive players in the league last year.
Why would a franchise desperate for scoring in Tatum's absence even consider this? Here lies the intrigue. Simons is not just any player. He represents both a lifeline and a dilemma. On one hand, he can drop 20 points with ease, create offense when nobody else can, and bring flashes of brilliance that ignite a crowd. On the other hand, his contract is heavy, nearly $28 million in the upcoming season, and expiring. The Celtics could treat him as a short-term bridge, or they could flip him for a piece that fits their long-term puzzle more cleanly. Which direction should they choose? What makes this situation shocking is the timing. Boston only just acquired Simons in the Holiday deal. Typically, when a franchise brings in a young, high-level guard, the plan is to test his chemistry with the roster, see how he adapts to the system, and then make long-term decisions. Instead, whispers suggest the Celtics could move on without giving him more than a handful of months in green. That would be bold, even ruthless, but it could also be the clearest sign yet that Brad Stevens and the front office are prioritizing flexibility over everything. And here is the part that raises eyebrows. If the Celtics do move Simons, it is not about giving up on the season, it is about betting bigger on the future. By shedding his contract, Boston could become fully cap compliant and put itself in a position to load up when Tatum is healthy again. Imagine the 2026 Celtics, with Tatum back at full strength, surrounded by cap space, depth, and perhaps another rising star brought in through the trade market. That is not just a team that can compete, that is a team built for dominance. But there is another layer, one that few want to discuss openly. Could trading Simons actually raise Boston's stock for this very season? By freeing up salary, they could chase undervalued contributors or stash assets that become mid-season ammunition. The Celtics know the East will remain open. Milwaukee is aging. Philadelphia is unpredictable. New York still lacks that final punch. Even with Tatum sidelined, Boston could find itself in the mix with the right complementary moves. In that light, the decision on Simons is not about giving up. It is about recalibrating, about making sure the team does not just survive the storm, but uses it to chart a new direction. For fans, this creates a tension that feels almost cinematic. Do you root for Simons to stay, to prove himself as the surprise savior who keeps Boston afloat until Tatum returns? Or do you see him as a valuable piece that, when traded, unlocks something greater, something more permanent? That is the curiosity gap at the heart of this debate. The only certainty is that the Celtics are not sitting still. They are exploring every option, every phone call, every possibility. And while the idea of trading away a player like Simons so soon after acquiring him feels shocking, maybe that is exactly the kind of fearless decision that keeps Boston positioned for glory. The future remains wide open, and the front office seems determined to make sure when Tatum steps back onto the court, he does so with a roster that is not just ready to compete, but ready to dominate. So the question that lingers is this: when the time comes to make the call, will Anthony Simons be the bridge Boston needed or the sacrifice that launched their next dynasty? Blake Griffin's hidden role in unlocking Derrick White's breakout. What if one of the most pivotal moments in Derrick White's rise as a Celtic did not come from a highlight play or a dramatic shot, but from an unexpected conversation with Blake Griffin over dinner? That is exactly the story that has begun to surface, and it raises a question few fans ever considered. How much did Griffin, during his short and underestimated
Blake Griffin,
time in Boston,
he just seems like the greatest teammate,
influence the
especially when he was with the
trajectory
Celtics. He was at the point in his
White's
career where I knew it
Griffin
was
not
last year.
just a name
I know that
on
there was
the
a lot of talk
roster
about you guys trying to get him to come
2023.
back.
He was a
I'm done.
presence,
Like, what was it
a
like being
connective
teammates with a guy
force in the
who's
locker
done so
room,
much and
and
seen so much?
perhaps the
Also, like,
perfect
correct me if I'm
veteran
wrong,
at the
carries this
perfect
very
time.
unique,
Fans remember
hilarious
his
personality.
dunks,
No, Blake's
his
unbelievable.
all-star years,
That year,
his explosive
he kind of like
style.
kept us all
But what
together.
they
Like he
may
can get
not
along with
fully
every person.
realize is how
He
seamlessly
can
he
be
shifted
serious. He
into
can
a
joke. He
mentor
can
role
just do a
once he
little bit
put
of
on the
everything.
green. And
It was
according to
awesome because
Derrick
like
White,
this is Blake Griffin.
it was
This is
Griffin's words, not his statistics, that left the deepest mark. White recalled that Griffin pulled him aside during a team dinner, looked him straight in the eye, and admitted something shocking. He had no idea how good White truly was until playing alongside him every day. For White, that moment was not casual banter, it was validation. Blake Griffin, the former #1 pick, the superstar who once defined a generation of highlights, was telling him that his game demanded recognition. For White, it was like an invisible switch flipped. Confidence took root, and from that moment, something began to change. Now here is the part worth considering. Shortly after that season, White reached new levels, earning an all-defensive nod, improving his efficiency, and hitting one of the most iconic playoff shots of the decade with that last-second putback against Miami. Coincidence? Or was Griffin's influence the spark? It is impossible to measure leadership in numbers, yet when patterns line up this clearly, it forces the question: did Blake Griffin quietly play one of the most underrated roles in Boston's recent success? This story takes an even more fascinating turn when you realize how close Griffin was to returning in 2024. White himself revealed how much the team wanted him back, describing Griffin as the glue who held everyone together, a veteran who willingly sacrificed, who took the early bus, who acted like a rookie in effort, despite being one of the most decorated players of his era. Imagine what a figure like that could have meant during Boston's actual title run. Griffin admitted that Brad Stevens and others kept the door open, that he had an offer to return, but when the moment came, his heart told him to step away. His own words, something shifted, and he knew it was time. Yet the reality remains that Boston's run to Banner 18 happened just months after his decision. Fans cannot help but wonder what it would have looked like if Griffin had been part of that roster, not as a star, but as the veteran voice who had already proven he could influence the mindset of rising players. And here is the curiosity gap that lingers. If Griffin could ignite such confidence in White with just one private conversation, how many other moments did he shape in that locker room that we will never hear about? Did he challenge younger players during practices in ways that translated into playoff poise? Did his presence teach Boston stars something about sacrifice that statistics can never show? The beauty of Griffin's story with the Celtics is that it was short, yet possibly far more impactful than people will ever give credit for. His time in green may not show up in career averages, but it shows up in the details, in the moments that changed confidence, in the subtle reminders of what leadership really looks like. And now, even though his career is over, Boston fans can still follow him as he begins a new chapter in broadcasting, carrying the same charisma that once carried a locker room. So the question that remains is this: was Blake Griffin's final season just a quiet farewell? Or was it the hidden catalyst that unlocked one of the most important pieces of Boston's future? Celtics finally grant Payton Pritchard the role he fought. For what if the most unexpected storyline of the Celtics season is not about Jayson Tatum's absence, not about the roster turnover, but about Payton Pritchard stepping into the role he spent years quietly chasing? That moment has arrived, and the shock is not that Boston is giving him the chance, but that his time has come exactly when the franchise needs him most. Pritchard's story has always carried a layer of tension. He once requested a trade in search of minutes, unsure if his path to significance in Boston even existed. Yet instead of leaving, he stayed, waited, worked, and transformed himself from an overlooked reserve into the reigning sixth man of the year. Now, with Tatum sidelined and veterans gone, the Celtics are not just giving him a bigger role, they are handing him the keys to a larger responsibility than ever before. The numbers from last season tell part of the story: career highs across the board in scoring, rebounding, and assists. But the more shocking detail lies in how he did it. His efficiency spiked with volume, not the other way around. Players who suddenly get more minutes often fade. Their percentages drop, and the shine wears off. Pritchard defied that rule, shooting nearly 47% from the floor and over 40% from deep while taking on the heaviest role of his career. That is not just growth, it is proof of readiness. And here is where the curiosity deepens. What happens when that role expands even further? Pritchard is expected to play over 30 minutes a night, nearly starters minutes, and for the first time, Boston is treating him like a foundational piece. Could this be the year he pushes himself into all-star conversation, not as a fringe name, but as a legitimate selection? The Celtics believe it is possible. Jaylen Brown will carry the scoring load, but his ball handling has always been the point of scrutiny. That makes Pritchard's role in breaking defenses even more critical. He has shown flashes of being a creator, not just a shooter. With Boston's spacing and volume approach from the three-point line, Pritchard's ability to collapse defenses and create open looks could become the single most underrated factor of the entire season. If he takes another leap as a facilitator, fans may find themselves watching the birth of a completely new version of Payton Pritchard, one who is not simply filling minutes, but reshaping the ceiling of the team. There is also a financial twist hidden in this story. Pritchard is locked into what may be the best value contract in the NBA. 3 more years at just over $23 million. In a league where shooters of his caliber often command double that price, Boston has secured elite production at bargain cost. It is rare for a championship contender to have both star power and contracts that keep flexibility alive, but Pritchard's deal is exactly the type that allows Boston to stay aggressive in the market while still rewarding their core. But here is the part no one wants to say out loud. Could Pritchard's rise make him more than a bridge for this season? Could he actually redefine the hierarchy of the Celtics' guard rotation even after Tatum returns? If his production holds, if his efficiency stays elite, and if he shows he can carry stretches as a primary creator, Boston may have discovered a long-term weapon that no trade could ever match in value. For now, fans are left with a storyline that feels almost cinematic. A player once buried on the bench, once rumored to be leaving, now stepping into the role he dreamed of with the weight of Boston's season on his shoulders. The Celtics are not tanking, they are not folding, they are betting on their depth, their development, and on Payton Pritchard's belief that he belongs. So the question that lingers is this: will Pritchard simply survive as a stopgap in Tatum's absence? Or will this be the season that cements him as one of the unexpected cornerstones of Boston's future? What if the biggest question hanging over Boston this offseason is not about how they will manage without Jayson Tatum, not about the salary cap maneuvering, but whether the front office would ever dare to trade Jaylen Brown? The suggestion has surfaced once again, and while it may sound unthinkable, The idea alone forces fans to wonder, could Boston ever cash in one of its stars for a package of youth and flexibility? The speculation comes from a trade pitch that sends Brown to the A. Detroit Pistons in exchange for Ron Holland II, Jaden Ivey, Tobias Harris, and a protected future first-round pick. On paper, it sounds bold, but almost lopsided. Detroit gains a proven all-star in his prime to pair with Cade Cunningham, instantly transforming a rebuilding project into a team with playoff aspirations. Boston, on the other hand, receives 2 high-upside prospects, 1 expiring veteran deal, and draft capital. But here is where the intrigue begins. The Celtics have already shifted the structure of their roster this summer, moving on from Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday, not because of performance, but because of the punishing second apron rules that could strangle flexibility for years. The front office has shown a willingness to be aggressive and creative, even when it means parting with core contributors. If they are willing to reshape the roster at that level, what doors remain open? And yet, trading Brown feels different. He is not just a scorer, he is the two-way anchor alongside Tatum, the co-star who turned Finals MVP last season into Banner 18. His averages last year do not just show efficiency, they show consistency in areas that win playoff games. To move him would not simply be a cap decision, it would redefine Boston's entire identity, which raises the real question: what kind of package would have to land on Brad Stevens' desk to make him even consider it? Here is the part that few talk about. The Pistons' offer, while intriguing, might not even scratch the surface of what Boston could demand. If Brown were ever to hit the trade market, nearly half the league would call. Teams with cap space, teams desperate for a two-way, wing teams on the edge of contention. Imagine the bidding war, the flood of offers that would instantly make Boston the most powerful negotiator in the NBA. Would they walk away with multiple unprotected picks, another rising star, or even a proven veteran who fits seamlessly with Tatum's prime? That curiosity gap is what keeps this discussion alive. The Celtics, however, are not signaling any desire to pull the trigger. Stevens has reiterated his belief in the Tatum-Brown pairing, and everything the front office has done points to one goal: keeping Boston in championship conversations, even during a so-called transition year. Shedding salary gave them breathing room, but it was also about positioning themselves to strike when the moment is right. Why dismantle a core that has already proven it can win when flexibility is finally back in their hands? And yet, fans cannot. Ignore the whispers. Trade pitches like this one plant seeds of possibility. They make people ask uncomfortable questions. Could Brown's value ever be higher than it is right now? Would Boston dare to sacrifice the present to double down on the future? Or is the mere existence of these rumors proof of something else? That the Celtics front office is playing chess while the rest of the league watches checkers, keeping every option open while still building around their star duo. At the end of the day, hope remains the prevailing emotion in Boston. Brown is still in green, still producing at an all-star level, and still carrying the mantle alongside Tatum. The team has trimmed the edges of the roster, but kept its foundation intact. And if history tells us anything, the Celtics do not panic. They position, which means as much as fans love to debate the possibility of a blockbuster, the far more likely storyline is this: Boston is sharpening its weapons, not dismantling them. So, the question that lingers is not whether the Celtics will trade Jaylen Brown, but rather what shocking move they are preparing for next to ensure that when Tatum returns, Boston is ready to chase Banner 19 with even greater force.